Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 216 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on how does couples therapy work? And it's Saturday, the 1st of July 2023 as I record this. So today's podcast episode is really a fun one, really quite an interesting one, because we always hear about couples therapy. We always hear that people do it. We always hear that you can be trained in it. But what actually happens in a couples therapy, and most importantly, how does it work? A lot of psychology people, we just mainly focus on the more individual forms of therapy, like as a random one, like psychodynamic, or most often cognitive behavioural therapy. These are the main ones that we learn about. We never really learn about joint therapy until more advanced levels of psychology. So that's why in this really interesting podcast episode, we're actually going to be focusing on couples therapy for change, and I really did enjoy it. So moving on to the psychology news section, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and there are actually some really good articles in here, including the first one. Expect and you shall receive. How often does your partner behave in ways that foster a good relationship? Do they regularly spend quality time with you, or support your interests or projects, whilst actually doing the chores that they said they were going to do? Oh yeah, that was a funny conversation from yesterday that I had with someone and their girlfriend. According to new work in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, Interpersonal Relationships and Group Processes, I mean, surely that journal can actually, have a shorter title. In any given week, your perception of how often they perform these sort of behaviours is tied more to your expectations than to reality. Dr. Samantha Joe at Western University and her colleagues found that people who expected plenty of positive behaviour from their partners perceived more of it. Those with low expectations, they failed to recognise when their partner was making more of an effort. This I could not agree more with. And yeah, I think this is completely true. And to be honest, this does not just apply to romantic relationships. This definitely applies for friendships and family relationships too, though. Because I can see this in so many different areas of life. Because if you have quite low expectations of a family member, because you know they're just going to do chores, they know that you're just going to be nice, and they know that you're just going to be great. When you actually aren't, for change, they're going to get really moany, they're going to shout and kick off, basically. I completely agree with that. So I think it's really interesting, and I think that we just need to remember that our own perceptions are really, really powerful things. And to be honest, I definitely think perceptions and the cognitive psychology behind perceptions, even though this is more social psychology, I guess, is one of the easiest areas of psychology research to actually apply to everyday life. So, really interesting, really applicable to everyday life. So it's really nice to know that this information does exist and we aren't just making this up, basically. So the second one I really do like. Kids' beliefs on prejudice shape their openness towards diversity. New research from the US suggests that framing prejudice as fixed or malleable can influence a child's interest in interracial friendship. This recent study explores whether prejudice theories, thinking prejudice is a fixed or malleable may play a part in kids' willingness to develop interracial friendships. The team's analysis suggests that children who see prejudice as malleable are more interested in interacting with a partner of a different race, a finding that could be open to potential interventions for teachers and caregivers who want to ensure children remain open to diversity in their friendships. So I definitely think this is a really applicable one, granted because of what's happened in the US this week and what the US Supreme Court's done. But taking a more general standpoint on this is that we all need to be more open about, because of one of these psychology lectures I actually had during my applying psychology module. The massive problem is that there is massive racial segregation, and none of us are immune to this though. I'm definitely open to the idea, and actually this year I've actually had a great friendship, or at least a good, really positive working relationship with this one black girl at my university. But again though, it's definitely something that we aren't immune to, and this actually reminds me of one of the quotes I saw on Twitter about being an anti-racist isn't about being completely free of racism, but realizing when we are being potentially racist or at least marginally prejudiced, and actually making sure that we fix it. But now that we've got the time research, the next step is definitely trying to do this as an intervention, just so we can help the children to actually be more open to diversity and equality for everyone, regardless who you are. And then hopefully this will go on in that adulthood, just so in the future we can create an even a better society for everyone. And the last one I think is absolutely fascinating. Keep it complex. If you're setting up an online petition, you should use common words and simple sentences to draw people in, right? Well, that might seem intuitive, like the best approach, but according to a new work by Dr. Markovitz at the University of Oregon, it's completely wrong. Sometimes it seems simplicity just doesn't cut it. His analysis of more than 1 million petitions in 8 different languages reveals the less readable petitions with fewer common words and more complex writing patterns got the most signatures. And this, I think, is so fascinating because online petitions are really interesting. And I definitely think that they do have the power. And I think in the UK, because protesting is basically illegal at this point, I think it would be interesting to see if online petitions actually grow even more. But I do agree though, because occasionally I sign an online petition from time to time on issues that I think are important enough, and they'll affect society as a whole. Well, but just that everyone benefits from it. And the really simplified ones, I actually don't read. So I do understand this. And if it sounds like a petition isn't written by someone who knows what they're talking about, then I don't sign it. So I do understand this. But this definitely has implications for campaigning, politics, and just society as a whole. So you might find that useful if you did want to start an online petition. So I hope you enjoyed the psychology news section. So let's move on to the personal update. So we're moved on to the personal update. This has been an absolute brilliant week, and I'm really, really happy. And I do have something psychology related, and in a moment. But I've been planning stuff with friends. I had a wonderful afternoon with two really good friends yesterday afternoon, and I have been preparing a whole bunch of projects, including a kick-ass start. So if you're interested in private mysteries, then definitely check it out. So if you go on kick-ass starter, search up my name, and then you'll find it there. But because that's not psychology related, I'm actually not going to talk about it too much. And then I'm also planning like a ton of like social things for my different friends. But one thing that I did want to actually talk about is that I got my university results this week. And I was so pleased, I was so relieved. So I can thankfully say that I've very much passed my degree. So I got a high 2-1 and I got firsts in all my clinical psychology modules this year. I'm extremely pleased because there were a few months ago when I was very unsure about this. I was panicking, I was really stressed, and to be honest, I was having really negative thoughts about it, and I was calling myself some horrific names just because just couldn't seem to get the hand of academic writing. Thankfully, that was all just a myth, and I was basically just like catastrophizing. But I'm really glad that I have done really well in my undergrad, that it's done now and I've passed. So I can happily say that I am going to do my master's at Kent, where I am now, because that's what I want to be. It's the degree that I want to do, and it's just, and I'm just so relieved because I was really concerned about this. So the reason why I'm telling you this is mainly so that if you are a psychology student and if you are concerned, if you just keep at it, keep trying, keep learning, you can get there. Believe me, if I can do it, anyone can do it. And I'm not saying that to be mean to myself. I truly mean that because I think I think a few months ago there were some close calls. And as always, I absolutely love to hear all your thoughts and feelings on today's podcast episode. So you can always email me, connorwiley@connorwiley.net. You can always leave a comment at the show notes at connorwiley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet on Twitter at sci-fi Wiley or leave a comment on the Facebook post at Connor Wiley, psychology author. And an absolute massive thank you over to all of the amazing readers on my email list who actually congratulated me about my university results. I didn't expect it, so when I read your messages, I was really pleased though. And so many of you said, well done to me, so thank you from the bottom of my heart. It really made my evening when I read those messages. You guys are amazing. And as you can probably tell, I always love to hear from all of you because it really helps me in the podcast feel more like a conversation. And today's podcast episode has been sponsored by Psychology of Relationships, the social psychology of friendships, romantic relationships, and more. So this is an absolute brilliant sponsor for today's episode because you cannot understand couples therapy and you cannot begin to understand the therapeutic side of it without understanding how human relationships form in the first place, be them friendships, romantic relationships, or anything in between, because it's how the couples forms that actually have a lot of impact on the therapy side and the personal interaction between them. So as always, this book is written in a really engaging and really easy to understand way, and it focuses on the biological, social, and the psychological reasons for why relationships develop, as well as communication. Something we always need to focus on because the psychology of communication is very important to have successful relationships. And then it also talks about why relationships change and end. Something else that's also really interesting, and even the psychological model that I talk about in those chapters, I still use today, and I still reference constantly in my own head, whenever I want to understand something about a relationship. And then it also talks about bystanderism, altruism, and so many different aspects of interpersonal relationships, including what causes any of one's sexuality, homosexuality, and so many more great topics that are absolutely fascinating. I love this book, and so many other readers are doing. So, if you want to deepen your understanding of this great social psychology topic, then definitely check it out. That is Psychology of Relationships, the Social Psychology of Friendships, Romantic Relationships, and more. Available from all major ebook retailers, and you can get the paperback and the hardback version from Amazon your local bookstore or local library if you request it. And you can buy the ebook directly from me at payhip.com/Con So whilst the buying books helps to support the creation and the editing of the podcast, my time is sponsored by my wonderful patrons. And as always, a massive thank you to my wonderful patrons, because your support shows that you like the show and you want it to continue. And if you wanted to get tons of great bonuses, early access to the blog post and so much more, well, you've become a patron at patreon.com/the Psychology Word Podcast. So that's enough for the personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So we're moving on to today's podcast episode. So we're going to be talking about how does couples therapy work. So I found this really interesting, and I think unofficially, knowing about couples therapy can actually be really helpful in all of our own relationships, because I think we can apply certain concepts or ideas. So you never know, you might learn something for your own relationships in today's podcast episode. So let's dive into it. As we know from previous podcast episodes, the entire point of therapy is to help improve lives, decrease psychological stress, and help a person with the difficulties they are experiencing. That is the general basis of all therapeutic work. Yet the main difference between individual and couples therapy is that couples therapy introduces three parties into the therapy, instead of the more traditional two, being the client and the therapist, since a couples therapy represents two clients and the therapist. This introduces extra complexity, especially as the couples therapist has to deal with not only their own therapeutic alliance with each of the clients, but the interaction between the two clients as well, which, if they've come to a couples therapy, is already in a very bad shape and normally very negative towards each other. Also, it is worth noting that couples come to therapy because they're highly conflicting views on similar experiences, and one of them or both of them is highly distressed about the relationship. As well as it might sound sad, but it isn't weird or odd for one client to be more hopeful or positive about the relationship and wanting to seek out therapy compared to the other. What happens in couples therapy? When it comes to how the therapy works, most couples therapy is done together, where you have both parts of the couple in therapy sessions. Then contacting or seeing one member of the couple alone is sometimes needed when extra information about the relationship is acquired by the therapist, yet it is always done with the permission of the other person. Although sometimes a single person does do couples therapy to help force a change in their relationship at home, because the other part of the couple doesn't want to attend therapy themselves, which I think is a shame, but it is great that this part of the couple still wants to try a therapy in a less common but still useful way. In addition, if we dive into the details about couples therapy, we need to understand that couples therapists ask a lot of questions about a range of topics, including some questions about each partner's family origins and other questions that challenge their beliefs as well as their perspectives. Of course, it has to be stressed that therapists never ever take sides in arguments, yet they might call out a person on the basis of their behaviour, contributing to relationship problems, since relational science has firmly demonstrated that one person alone doesn't cause a relationship to experience problems. It is always both partners. Everyone in a relationship has a role to play in a problem. As a result, the entire point of couples therapy is to bring partners closer together, or if unfortunately needed, to intelligently end the relationship. This is done by the process of making the partners learn a kind of passion for themselves and their partners, resolving dilemmas, rekindling the feelings that made them attracted to each other in the first place, as well as helping the partners to develop constructive ways to manage their own negative feelings. Furthermore, similar to cognitive behavioural therapy, in between therapy sessions, couples have asked, and they really should do with this, to practice the skills, insights, and behaviours that they've learnt in therapy at home. Since something I always remember about therapy is that therapy isn't a passive process. A therapist is more of a tool giver, instead of a magical fairy. In other words, the therapist can give the clients all the tools that they can, but unless the clients want to change, the therapy will sadly fail. Therapeutic approaches in a couples therapy. As psychologists and professionals, we are definitely not strangers to different approaches to the exact same problem, and most of the time there is a better approach, and of course the better I say in air quotes. For example, it is easy to argue based on the empirical evidence that CBT is better for depression and anxiety, for example, compared to the systemic approach. And yes, I know tons of people are going to go, no, but that's what I actually added in the based on the empirical evidence. Couples therapy follows a similar idea because there are several approaches that a therapist could take when helping their clients. Also, these approaches have some level of empirical support behind them. However, whilst these different theories take different approaches to relationships, they all share the goal of improving a couple's functioning, and they seek to make a relationship a source of happiness and meaning for a couple. As well as similar to other therapists, couples therapists are normally trained in more than one of these approaches, so that they can be flexible and draw on different ideas from different approaches. We look at 3 approaches to couples therapy now. Emotional focused therapy. This form of psychotherapy focuses on helping a couple restore a couple's emotional and physical bond, viewing this bond as the best deliverer of a change in a relationship. The therapy draws on attachment theory to encourage a couple to express and access whatever lies under their anger or feelings of alienation. Then it is this revelation or disclosure of their vulnerabilities that becomes a very powerful means for making the other partner be responsive. Following this, and with the contact being restored in the relationship, the couples have a renewable source of comfort, and this allows them to solve whatever problems they may face together. The Gottman methods. And anyone who's actually read into the relationships psychology field is definitely familiar with Gottman, because he designed this method and therapy. The therapy focuses on emphasizing the outsized power of negative emotions in harming a relationship, stressing the importance of bids for connection and response from each other. A couple's vital need to repair the damage done by them missing their bids, and the value of sharing their thoughts and feelings, which Gottman calls a couple's inner worlds. Through this method, the partners learn how to show their love, affection, and respect for each other as a way of building closeness and making something Gottman called love maps that reflect the partner's psychological world. I imagine relationship therapy. Our final therapy is certainly one that I have never ever heard of before, but it's interesting to know that the theme of this therapy is getting the love you want. And yes, when I read that, I was a bit freaked out, because that sounds really weird in a therapy context. It basically focuses on enabling the partners to fulfill the ideal type of love that they are developed early in life through attachment to a caregiver. This can be thought of as an ideal love between a mother and a child, and that was just an example. I would not be surprised to find out that if this theory was actually based on psychodynamic ideas. To achieve this, each partner takes a turn listening and talking, mirroring or reflecting what the other is saying to show her that they're listening and they're understanding what the other is talking about. Then this has the added bonus of validating the other person's feelings and perspective. In other words, I think the entire point of all of these therapies is making sure that each partner does feel understood, listened to, and valued. What's the difference between couples counselling and couples therapy? So for our final section, we need to understand that whilst couples counselling and therapy does have a lot of overlap, there are immense differences too. For instance, couples counselling focuses on a single current problem between each member of the couple, and this tends to be done in 6 sessions or less. Whereas couples therapy is a lot more involved, and it is a deep exploration into the roots of current problems, with the full intent of repairing the dysfunctional patterns of interaction that the couples has. As well as this has a lot to do with undoing the emotional damage each partner has inflicted on each other during the course of the relationship. In addition, this normally involves each partner helping the other to understand their needs, so each partner knows what they want and how to support the other as well. Normally, couples therapy involves an average of 12 sessions, but as everyone knows, relationships are dynamic, complex, and they really depend on the goals of what the couple going for therapy actually wants. Since when dealing with problems like infidelity, this requires a whole lot more work by the partners and the therapists, and this definitely requires some time. And yeah, I can definitely understand how solving infidelity problems can be tougher than others. Conclusion. Couples therapy is definitely something I hope none of us ever have to go through. Yet, as I mentioned before, being a psychology student or professional doesn't make us immune to the topics that we talk about and learn about, and most importantly, we love. Therefore, if you need a couples therapy, then unofficially, I'm saying, just go for it. It might be the thing that saves a relationship you treasure. However, we now know that couples therapy is all about improving feelings of closeness, feelings, and generally making partners more understanding towards each other, as well as tackling the dysfunctional patterns of interactions that happened inside the relationships. Couples therapy can be a great area to work in with challenges, fights, and domestic arguments from time to time. To say 2 days never alike is probably an immense understatement, but it is what makes our profession so much fun to learn about, study, and want to work in, so that we can improve lives and help people. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you got something out of it. I think it was really nice to actually look at couples therapy for a change, because we do tend to focus a lot on individual psychotherapies simply because that is where most of the work is, and that's where most of the content is. But it's always nice to change it up a little. Personally, I would never go into couples therapy just because I just wouldn't. Not only because of my own lack of experience in that department, but also just more the fact that I do not want to get in the middle of a couples, and I will leave that for better professionals. But if you know someone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And if you want to learn more, then definitely check out Psychology of Relationships, the social psychology of friendships, romantic relationships, and more. Available in all the usual places, and you can buy the ebook directly from me at payhip.com/Con Whiteley. And if you wanted to give the podcast a bit of like monthly support and get a whole bunch of great bonuses, then you can now become a patron at patreon.com/the Psychology Bar Podcast. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at conwhiteley.net. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time.